Have you ever been told to open your hip? In today's video, I would like to explain what this really means and how you can find this idea of opening the hip when you're riding. I'm Callie from CRK Training. This is my weekly video show. Thank you for being here with me. And the idea of opening the hip is really important for us as riders because our hip joint, where the femur comes into the pelvis, is a really important joint for riding. It's what allows us to go with the motion of the horse and feel that fluid, effortless movement. When we get tight in this joint, we feel like we're bouncing, we feel stiff, and then we usually feel pretty out of balance and a lot more unconfident when we don't have that stability that comes from not only alignment, but also the fluid movement. So first, to just simply define this, as riders, when we use the term open the hip, it means to open the angle from torso to thigh. So for example, if I turn her where you just have a little bit better view, when I open my hip, it means that I'm going to be opening this angle. So if I take my leg back, this would be opening this angle. If I would bring the leg forward, this would be closing the angle. So let's see what it translates to when I'm actually riding around. So here as I'm walking, if I was to close my hip angle, I would come forward. So to do this, I'm now having to tighten along, grip with my legs in order to keep myself feeling stable. And I'm also starting to feel a little bit more of a strain in my back because I've hollowed a bit when I came forward. So now if I open the angle, it would be shifting back. And again, I'm going to find that shift or that opening from the joint here at my hip, not from just leaning back by rounding or from leaning back with my upper body. Because you can see I can lean back with my upper body and it actually doesn't open this angle. But if I flatten my back and I come back from the hip, that's what opening the hip looks like. So a lot of times people talk about this, riding instructors might refer to opening the hip in rising trot and in canter. So let me pick up a rising trot. And if I close my hip, it's going to look something like this. So I lean forward, I'm contracting, tightening with my legs, which brings them further up. And I'm also leaning forward with my upper body, so this angle's more closed. Now again, I'm going to think flat back. And when I open, I'm opening from the hip joint. And now you can see in the rise phase of my posting, this angle is a lot more open. Now in the canter transition, I'm going to think of also opening that angle for the canter so that when Noelle transitions into canter, she can lift her withers into that transition. And we'll take a look at another transition to see what the difference would be. So now in this transition, if I close my hip when asking for the canter, we end up in a much more unbalanced transition. Now here in the canter, I can open my hip, and that's going to bring me more back towards the vertical and improve her movement, in this case, than if I close the hip and I start leaning forward, which shifted the weight to her front end and caused her to break back to trot from the canter. So it's not that closing the hip is always the wrong thing to do. For example, when we're going into 2-point, when we're going over a jump, we close the hip angle. But it's important to understand the definition of this term so that if you're in a lesson and your instructor tells you to open your hip, you understand what it means. Your back stays stable, and the movement should be here from your hip joint. So whether you're closing forward to go over a jump, or whether you're being told to open this angle in order to change your balance or change the movement from the horse, the movement is from the hip joint. It's not from the back to go forward or from the back to go towards the hind of the horse. So I hope this was helpful. If you could leave me a comment and let me know if you have any questions, and also in which what kind of a scenario you have been told to open your hip. I'll look forward to your comments. If you're watching this anywhere besides crktrainingblog.com, that's where the best comments are, and thank you for watching.